Alright, so I'm doing my presentation on the Berlin Wall, and first I think it's important to back up to the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, Germany is divided, and it is divided into occupation zones, which basically just means that the United States, France, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union each have certain sections of Germany that they are in control of. An interesting place is Berlin because it is also divided into 4 more sections by these same countries, and you have America, Great Britain, and France controlling the west side, and you have the Soviet Union controlling the east side. And basically the main differences are that the west is democratic, controlled by democratic countries, and that the east side is communistic. So building up to the wall, there's a few things that kind of are precursors about the division that is happening between the east and west side of Berlin. The first thing is that the Soviet military is actually sent down to the line dividing East and West Germany to safeguard it. That's the first physical thing. Some of the more not physical things but they still represent division, are the fact that there is a 30-day interzone pass that's required to travel between the sectors of Germany. So it would be like saying that I couldn't leave Auburn to go home, which is insane, that you'd have to get permission to travel just, to a different, county or city. And this is a picture of the interzone pass, and if you can see here, I have circled that it is a single round-trip interzonal pass. So this doesn't mean that you have a pass to go and stay. This means that you have a pass to stay for a limited amount of time, but you eventually have to come back. The next thing that happens is that West Germany comes up with its own currency, and that is pictured here, and it is called the Deutsche Mark. This is just another symbol of division, that they can't even have the same currency in East and West Berlin. The Soviets also come up with their own form of currency called the Ostmark, which is right here. And this just is just leading up to the actual physical division of Berlin. Okay, so the Soviet Union is really starting to feel the pressure from the democratic countries, and it's really starting to feel it's losing support for communism. And in an attempt to take over Berlin, the Soviet Union cuts off all access to the entire city. So this is, during a time when the Truman Doctrine and a really big push for democracy around the world is happening in, the West. And the United States and France respond by flying in supplies. And eventually they can keep this up for as long as they need to, and the Soviet Union realizes this, so they stop the blockade after about 10 months in 1949. And like I said earlier, the Soviet Union is really starting to feel this pushback from its people, and really not even a pushback, but a leaving, a mass exodus of its people. I guess you could call it the democratic scare. During 1949 and 1959, over 2 million people leave East Germany to go to West Germany. And West Germany creates the Federal Republic of Germany. So the Soviet Union is really starting to feel this, and it feels that too many people are leaving. And so it responds by building actual physical barriers. On December 11th, 1957, leaving East Germany without permission is forbidden, and you can go to prison for up to 3 years if you are found in violation of this. The next thing is that there are actual sectoral borders being built between East and West Berlin. And the last thing that happens, which is more of a symbolic thing because there is already a barbed wire type fence set up, but the more symbolic closing and cutting off of the two sides is the Brandenburg Gate being closed. And this is a picture of the gate, the Brandenburg Gate. Many famous presidents have given speeches here. I'm pretty sure Ronald Reagan gave a speech here, but it was more of just a symbol, the actual border being the barbed wire fence, which was just a temporary thing. A actual concrete fence was built, or concrete wall was built later on. And I have walls question mark because it was actually two walls. In between the two walls was an area called the Death Strip, and this is basically where watchtowers and guard dogs would patrol, and that there were trip wire machine guns. So this is basically an area that you do not want to be in if you were trying to cross over into West Berlin. And a lot of people found ways around this. Some of the more interesting ways of escaping communism were Horst Klein, who went over the Berlin Wall on a tightrope, and then you have Michael Becker, who went across on a zip line. Most people just hid in cars, did it, I guess, the safer way by having people from West Berlin, drive them across. My favorite story is the Bethke brothers, who it was three brothers, and the eldest brother escaped by floating on an inflatable mattress across the Elbe River. And 8 years later, the second oldest brother soared over the wall on a steel cable. He fired with a bow an arrow to a rooftop in West Berlin. And once they were both over there, they decided that they needed to go back and get the younger brother. And to do this, they flew an ultralight plane over the wall, picked up the younger brother, and then flew him back. Which, why they didn't all just go at the same time, I have no clue, but I thought it was a very interesting way to escape communism. And eventually, the wall goes down. A few factors leading up to this were obviously the huge pushback by the people in East Berlin. They obviously didn't like their not being able to see, relatives that were on the other side. They didn't like the actual communist type of government. So there was a lot of protests between students. Just everybody was there was an outbreak of protesting against the wall. But ultimately, it was because the countries behind the Iron Curtain went bankrupt, and so they could no longer, I guess, continue the upkeep of this wall, continue to police it and things like that. On the actual day that the borders were lifted, it was actually an accident because Gunter Schabowski announces that the restrictions on travel visas are going to be lifted, but he's really vague about it, and he doesn't really set an exact time. And whenever he's asked how soon it will be, he says immediately, but not meaning immediately as in now, just immediately as in, there's not going to be any waiting. Years is what I think he meant, but I think people took it as immediately, like right now, today, as of this moment. In actuality, there was supposed to be some kind of visa approval that was going to go on before you could actually cross over, but crowds started to gather at the Berlin Wall, and a man named Harold Jaeger opens the gates because he is, being stormed with, thousands of people, and he gets very frustrated, and he's not getting any answers of, when the borders are actually supposed to be down and people are allowed to cross. So he just eventually lets everyone go through. The aftermath is that the Brandenburg Gate is opened once again, more of a symbol rather than an actual border, but there's also, this marks the end of 30 years of division between East and West Berlin. And interestingly, pieces of the Berlin Wall are reused around the world. One of the ones I thought was the most interesting was there is a piece of the Berlin Wall in a Las Vegas casino men's bathroom, and this ultimately marks the fall of the Soviet Union.